It's the happiest time of the year for someone. Not for me, but for someone. Hi guys, it's Kayla, and I'm back with my annual end-of-year BL series ranking video. I must say, I've had a fairly productive year when it comes to BL. Everything else, not so much. I'm living in the moment, and at this moment, all I want to do is ramble about 7 of my favorite shows from this year. They say the only way out is through, so let's get through December with some holiday queer. Frankly, I'm regretting that pun, but it's too late to go back now. This year, every series in my rankings started and ended in 2025. It just happened to turn out that way, but typically I would consider any series that started in 2024 and ended in 2025 as eligible. A quick content warning, this video will include brief discussions and depictions of the following. Take care and proceed with caution. Now let's get into the ranking. Kicking off at number 7 is my 2025 government-issued Korean BL, Secret Relationships. The people yearn for toxic yaoi. This one really did it for me. I love this series because it starts off like your average romance drama, then it quickly evolves into something dark and sinister. The tonal shift is jarring at first, but in retrospect, there was always foreshadowing. Our first indication of danger appears right there in the opening sequence. Daeun is essentially trapped between Soohyun and Jaemin, who are two of the most toxic men you'll ever meet. Soohyun has serious anger issues, and these issues manifest in physical violence. He's a very self-centered individual, and he refuses to leave Daeun alone. Jaemin is similarly possessive over Daeun, but even worse if you can believe it. In my opinion, he's a groomer, because the way he managed to insert himself into Daeun's family was very intentional. He wanted them to rely on him financially. He wanted Daeun to feel indebted to him so he could hold it over his head. So he could say, "You owe me because I took care of you." It's fucked up. These awful, horrible men are making Daeun's life a living hell with their sense of entitlement. Then comes Sunghyun, who is the literal human embodiment of sunshine. He's just kind of there, but it works because Daeun needs someone who's stable and consistent. Someone who does things for him without expecting anything in return. He doesn't need a traumatic backstory. He doesn't need a super complex personality. Just being Daeun's rock is enough. It's so fascinating how Soohyun is outwardly dangerous, whereas Jaemin is secretly dangerous. This dichotomy made the self-harm scene with Jaemin feel all the more horrifying. That was the moment when he went from being a gaslighter to being the fire itself. I have to commend Kim Ho-young because you can so clearly see the change in his eyes. His acting was exceptional. The psychology behind Jaemin's actions could elicit its own discussion. What made him snap? How does mental health play into all of this? Honestly, I'm not sure, and I don't necessarily see the point of explaining his behavior. He tries to commit a murder-suicide, and personally, I don't need a detailed breakdown of what led him down that road. I do find humor in the fact that he makes Soohyun seem normal by comparison. You know it's bad when the worst man you know turns over a new leaf. My only critique of this series is that Soohyun didn't suffer nearly as much as he should have in the end. He was also responsible for endangering Daeun's life. I just hate him, and I hate that it took Daeun's attempted murder for him to become a better person. While we're at it, it's crazy how Soohyun and Jaemin claimed to care so much about Daeun. Meanwhile, they were the ones making him depressed. Their little agreement to both reject him was so dumb, and it just speaks to the fact that they never considered his wants or needs in the first place. This series isn't just a romance, it's also a thriller, and that's why it stuck with me. Korean BLs really excel when it comes to stories involving trauma and sensitive topics. Secret Relationships is another example of this. It's definitely up there on my KBL list. Counting down at number 6 is the pseudo-retro high school BL series, Gel Boys. If Boss Kuno's the director, you know it's going to be good. It's an undisputable fact. From I Told Sunset About You to Paradise of Thorns, this man does not come to play, and Gel Boys is no exception. The balance between aesthetics and storytelling is perfect. At first, the style is what drew me in, that Y2K maximalist aesthetic. It's so eye-catching. The fashion, the set dressing, even the motion graphics. They chose a super niche theme and took it to the extreme. It really paid off because this particular style became known as the Gel Boys aesthetic. It spawned a life of its own on TikTok, inspiring so many dance trends, so many outfit videos, and of course, a plethora of nail art. This series formed such a colorful, creative community, and that's one of the reasons why I connected with it. I am now old enough to agree that it is, in fact, that damn phone. That phone is the cause of so much angst, jealousy, and delusion. I'm speaking from experience here. Formod specifically needs a break from that phone. I got irritated with him quite often, and I had to keep checking myself, because honestly speaking, it takes one to know one. Everyone has pretended to like something their crush likes. Everyone has posted something on Instagram for one specific person to see. We could talk about how accurately this series portrays teenhood, but I'm still doing this shit in my late 20s. A while back, I was in a situationship with this person who would ghost me all the time, so to get their attention, I went out and bought their favorite book. Then I proceeded to post an Instagram story with the book. And when they didn't watch my story, me and my best friend decided to do a photo shoot with the book. Did it work? Only temporarily. All this to say, I totally understand why Formod acts so impulsively. It's just frustrating to watch from the third person. Pretending to like nail art is his way of getting Xian's attention, of making it seem like they have something in common. It's kind of sad, because in my opinion, Formod doesn't really have his own identity. He just co-ops everyone else's interests. Trying to find your own identity during your teenage years is a major theme in Gel Boys. We also see this depicted in Bua's struggle with being mixed race. Who would have thought 2025 would be the year of Asian representation? Per usual, I relate. No one takes him seriously, his so-called friends are constantly ditching him and invalidating his emotions, and perhaps worst of all, his crush rejects him because he looks like a white boy. For me, the scene where he dyes his hair to appear more Asian was so painfully sincere because I've been doing the same thing for almost a decade. Most people think my natural hair color is black, but it's actually light brown, so I can confirm this is a canon event. Bua's insecurities when it comes to his racial identity were portrayed in a way that everyone could recognize, but only some could truly understand. There's no better way for me to describe it. Bua and Babin's friendship/situationship was my favorite part of the series because their connection felt so authentic to me. They were just two kids fanboying over their K-pop bias. In the beginning, there was nothing complicated about it. Even when Babin was stringing Bua along, hurting him in subtle but biting ways, he still had their platonic bond to fall back on. In comparison, I feel like Formod and Xian were kind of forcing it, meaning I'm not sure if they wanted a romantic relationship or they just wanted the attention it would bring. I think the fact that their no-status relationship was built on a lie opened them up for even more deception and toxicity in the long run. That being said, I don't feel strongly about anything the characters did in this series because they're teenagers, and like I mentioned earlier, we've all gotten ourselves into similar messes. You see a bit of yourself in every character, and there's something nostalgic about that. That's why Gel Boys is so universally beloved. I actually took notes back when I first watched this series, so I'm going to read some of them to you because I think they're funny. In reference to episode 3, I said, "Who knew airdrop could hold so much meaning?" I also said, "This series is just everyone trying to make each other jealous," which it is. In reference to episode 5, I said, "Weaponizing the close friends feature is crazy." I also said, "I can't believe I'm watching these people fight over a Spotify playlist." In reference to episode 6, I said, "Formod is out here wrecking lives. He needs to be stopped." I also said, "I respect Babin because he has a job." Two more things before I go. I love all the pop culture references in this series, particularly the mentions of various K-pop and T-pop groups. The inclusion of fandom culture made the story feel more believable. Speaking of music, the Gel Boys OST has not left my on-repeat playlist since it was released. The other thing I want to mention is the fact that this series was exclusively filmed on an iPhone. I would highly recommend checking out the behind-the-scenes footage on Look's YouTube channel. They would basically send the actors into public spaces and yell action. They had a phone, some duct tape, and a dream. And look what they managed to make. Next up at number 5 is Channel 3's overly dramatic 90s throwback series, Reset. I finished this series in one sitting, right to the dome for 10 hours straight. Do you know what it's like to experience every emotion under the sun in a single day? Every year, there's a series that I cry all the way through, and this year, it was Reset. I also spent the entire series giving unsolicited commentary to the wall. You know how you'll pause a show to comment out loud about what's happening? Yeah, that was me. It has become increasingly rare in the Thai BL industry to see two people who aren't an established ship act together as an on-screen couple. This series made me realize that. I had no clue what to expect going into it because Pan and Pond seemed like such a random pairing. Maybe it's because we have our own lore with Pan over at Lovecast, so to me, he's just some guy. Like, imagine if your friend popped out in a BL series with someone you've been a fan of for years. It was giving that. So to sum up my reaction in simplest terms, I was gobsmacked. It's like their chemistry reached out from the screen and struck me in the face. I never could have prepared for what was to come. A rich boy who's head over heels for a scrappy, ambitious actor is the ideal setup for a series full of longing stares and acts of service. Tada admires Armin from afar, pulling the strings to ensure that his career takes off. The latter only knows him as TD, his one-person fan club that has supported him from the very beginning. In the first iteration of their life, they never meet due to Armin's sudden, violent death. But for him, death isn't the end, as Armin wakes up in the past, back when he was a starving artist, working tirelessly to get his big break. We never quite know why he was transported into the past, but it's heavily implied that he and Tada were meant to be together, and this is their second chance at love. Of course, it goes a lot deeper than that. Armin is also receiving a second chance to make smarter decisions in his career so he doesn't end up dying alone. Likewise, Tada is receiving a second chance to make his identity known and to prove himself as Armin's one true love. You guys know how I feel about the soulmates trope. It's going to devastate me every time, especially when it's combined with time travel. I kept calling this series the 2025 version of My Stand-In, but it really is comparable. Both shows center around feelings of guilt, regret, and wanting to travel back in time to make things right. I really vibe with this concept. Who wouldn't want to right the mistakes of the past? Something as small as saying the words "I'm sorry" to a childhood friend, or something as big as thwarting the plans of your jealous co-stars. Armin sets out to rewrite history, with Tada and his resources at his side. I was captivated by all the ways in which Tada was able to outsmart everyone. He is the king of industry politics and crisis management. Honestly, I don't know how Armin got so far the first time around without Tada's direct involvement, because his ops go crazy. I continue to be such a fan of Pond's acting. Reset is an emotionally charged series, and there isn't a single moment where he isn't matching that tone. The guy is a talented crier. I also think we got to see what Pan is truly capable of through his performance in this series. Sadly, Oh My Sunshine Night was trash with a capital T, so it's been nice to see him receive so much positive recognition for Reset. What makes this series so amusing to me is the fact that it follows the archetype of a classic licorne or a Thai soap opera. I love theatrics. I love the unpredictable chasm of fame. I love a cartoonishly evil antagonist. There certainly isn't a dull moment. Every episode ends on a wild note, and their use of cliffhangers was anxiety-inducing in the best way possible. The plot twists did render me speechless. The most bizarre one has to be the reveal that Tada's stepbrother Two-Tit is in love with him. I don't know about you, but I never for a second interpreted Two-Tit's jealousy as a romantic infatuation. We're well aware of his grudge against Tada. He feels that he and his mother have been wrongly banished from the family business. Generally, he seems jealous of Tada's success and aims to make his life a living hell. When he notices his stepbrother's fondness for Armin, he begins to target him as a way to mess with Tada. Apparently, he was also jealous of Armin the whole time. I just don't see the point of adding this layer of pseudo-incest to his character. His motivations already track. Why did we have to make it weird? If I had to offer one critique, this would be it. One thing this series does really well are time skips. The story takes place across the second iteration of Armin's life. Specifically, they focus on the time period when he's filming his movie Deep Depths. So in this case, time skips are highly necessary. Every time we skip ahead, we know exactly where we are and what's going on. There's no room for confusion. Apart from time skips, this series also uses a lot of flashbacks. When Armin encounters a specific person or situation, it triggers his memories from the past. We get a glimpse inside his mind, and again, there's never any confusion about what we're seeing. I like how they put visual text on the screen to show what date Armin is flashing back to. It's such a simple detail, but it makes a world of difference. The highlight of this series has to be these storytelling techniques because they all work together to create a solid, comprehensive plot. The last thing I need to address is the finale. Oh my god, it was impeccable. This is the most satisfying finale of 2025. I stand by that. We see Two Tit's resentment reach a climax in this sensational rooftop showdown. Tada gets the shit beat out of him by Two Tit's people. Two Tit shoots Armin square in the shoulder. Armin dangles off the building before falling to his possible demise. It's a fast-paced sequence of events that could potentially lead to a gruesome ending, but it doesn't. The story concludes on the most satisfying note imaginable. Armin is alive and well. His movie is a massive hit. He's in a good place with his co-stars. Sam leaves Charlie. Pat is a successful chef. Two Tit is locked up in a psychiatric hospital, and Tada and Armin get their happily ever after. It's almost too idealistic, but I expect nothing less from a BL. This next one is a familiar title. Coming in at number 4 is season 2 of my silly little show about race car drivers with superpowers, the one and only Pit Babe. I've said this before, but when it comes to the Pit Babe cinematic universe, you just have to embrace it. There's no need to overexert yourself, no need to connect the dots, just shut your brain off and have some fun. Season 2 was a mess in every sense of the word, and usually that kind of description would turn a person off. But not me. I became even more invested in these characters than I already was. Let's go through some of them. In last year's ranking video, you guys may have picked up on the fact that I felt pretty disconnected from Charlie. I don't remember talking about him much. I didn't have anything to say. However, in season 2, I grew very attached to Charlie. I think it's because he's bolder in this season, more assertive, and I loved the character development. We see him speaking his mind, standing up for himself. He exudes confidence in a way that made me look at him differently. There were times when I felt as though he was being too combative, particularly with Babe, but more often than not, I would say his anger was justified. Throughout the whole series, I was hoping and praying that he would beat Willie's ass. Like, Charlie, how do you let this little boy come on to your man? Kill him. All this to say, I came out of season 2 with a newfound love for Charlie. Also, I feel like we are severely underestimating how cool it is that he can absorb multiple powers at once. Yes, it almost kills him, but he's willing to make the sacrifice, and that's why he's Big Papa. Let's move on to Babe. He's forever an icon. And that being said, there is something I need to get out of my system. Why is it that everyone expects the worst of him? I was surprised by the lack of trust that people have in him. In season 2, he settled down with his boyfriend who he plans on marrying, and the other characters are still characterizing him as a playboy. What is going on here? Babe's entire life revolves around Charlie. He worships him like a deity, and that isn't an exaggeration. So would it make sense for Babe to go and cheat with this random boy who is obviously profiling him for nefarious reasons? I was so shocked by everyone's reaction to Babe's sexual assault. The other characters, including Charlie, would refer to it as cheating. To Charlie's benefit, at least he realized that Babe was just trying to get intel on Tony. But still, the blame that was being placed on Babe when he was a literal victim was insane. I need to move on before I rage quit. In recent months, I have come to the conclusion that I hate Pete. It's like the complete opposite of my situation with Charlie. In season 1, I was very sympathetic to his past with Tony and his unrequited love for Wei. However, he completely lost me in season 2. He went from being the most important player in taking down Tony to being the most useless, self-centered recluse. All he cared about was fucking that guy who looks like Wei. Oh, Tony's alive? You guys can handle that. Oh, Kenta's been kidnapped and no one has heard from him in days? He's probably fine. Now that one is crazy, because wasn't Kenta your friend? To not even care that his friend might be dead is pure insanity. This whole series is pure insanity. While I'm here, let me confess that I don't like Chris either. Maybe I would have connected with him if they revealed his backstory earlier in the season. It was pretty obvious that he was Wei's twin, but then what? I adore Supernut, I'm an OG fan, but I did not enjoy seeing him in the role of Chris. The character is just so shallow, which actually makes him the perfect fit for Pete. You know what? I ship it. I suppose it's time for me to talk about my obsession with Kenta. Shortly after the end of season 1, I was slowly indoctrinated into the cult of Kenta. I don't know how it happened, but one day I just woke up with Kenta on my mind, and ever since then, I haven't been able to shake him. I would 100% consider him one of my favorite BL characters of all time. I think it's the mixture of trauma, daddy issues, and a thirst for revenge that really gets me going. I also think he has a great chest on him, but that's irrelevant. Kenta's unrelenting determination to kill Tony once and for all is what made season 2 so entertaining. His character was single-handedly pushing the narrative forward. Anytime there was a lull in the action, Kenta swooped in with his comically large knife and skin-tight t-shirt. Talk about a character standing on business. Kenta is a lone wolf in season 2. He's driven by his hatred for Tony, and he feels a responsibility to stop him. In his eyes, he's just finishing what he started. Because he's so one-track minded, he prefers to go at it alone. It's not like anyone's stepping up to help him anyway. That is, except for Kim. I was so enthralled by the strange relationship between Kim and Kenta. I call it strange because if you go back to season 1 when Kim is captured by Tony's people, the person in charge of holding him hostage is Kenta. Cut to season 2, and now Kim is the one freeing Kenta from captivity. It's a full circle moment, one that gives you hope for the future. However, Kim and Kenta don't end up together in the end. As much as I loved seeing them interact, I wasn't too upset by this outcome. Personally, I read their relationship as one-sided on Kim's part. I never for a second thought that Kenta had romantic feelings for him. The only time I questioned my interpretation was when they kissed in the warehouse, but even that felt like an adrenaline-fueled compulsion to me. Regardless, I do catch myself picturing an alternate universe where they're boyfriends, just trying to live a normal, Tony-free life. Now, if it's boyfriends you're looking for, then we need to address the elephant in the room. North and Sonic are canon. Their relationship being official was my main source of excitement going into season 2. Much like Kenta, these two caught me in a chokehold post season 1. It was heavily implied that North and Sonic knew they had feelings for each other, but were too afraid to confront them. So imagine the smile on my face when season 2 kicked off with the entire X-Hunter team asking Sonic when he thinks North is going to confess to him. It reinforced the idea of their feelings being an open secret. The continuity was great. I read North as a person who despises change. He often vocalizes his wish for the team to stay as they are. So when Sonic returns from his studies abroad, North is insistent on resuming business as usual. He's forever chasing nostalgia, but deep down, he knows that he can't move forward with his life unless he comes to grips with reality. This man, who is super charismatic, who lights up every room he enters, is suddenly stumbling over himself at every single turn. As a viewer, North's character arc is so engaging because we get to see him work through his fear of change. For the first time in his life, he confides in others, and their words of encouragement serve as a wake-up call. When he finally makes a move on Sonic, the payoff is so satisfying. Instantly, they fall back into sync. It's like they were never out of sync to begin with. Do not fret, for Jeff and Alon are still my favorite couple in the Pit Babe universe. Ironically, I don't have much to say about them. I do have a lot to say about Alon though. I was his #1 defender this season. The only time I couldn't defend him is when he got unreasonably mad at Jeff for lying about his powers, even though he was also lying to him. I would add him stealing Charlie's blood and giving it to Tony onto the list, but I understand why he did that. There's only so much you can do when you have an exploding microchip in your brain. Alon was determined to prove himself this season, to show the team that he was capable of protecting them despite being injured and having no no powers. More than anything, he was proving it to himself. His body isn't in the best condition, he feels like he's damn near 60, and there goes his team, off fighting a war against this body broker with a blowout. Not to mention, said broker has captured Dean. What's a man to do but negotiate a deal? You give me powers, you give me Dean, and I'll give you Charlie's blood so you can make your little army of X-Men. What Alon fails to realize is that Tony never plays fair. Luckily, when the team finds out what Alon's been up to, they don't berate him because they know he was just trying to help. Receiving their compassion marks a pivotal moment for Alon because it makes him recognize that he is a valuable member of the team. He doesn't need powers to earn their respect. Isn't that beautiful? There's one scene in this season that made me tear up. Dean returning to the X-Hunter team and being embraced by everyone except Jeff. If you haven't noticed, there seems to be an ongoing theme of proving yourself worthy. Dean goes head-to-head with Winter in an attempt to prove that he can be trusted. Sadly, he falls into a coma and gets captured by Tony. This ties back to Alon's desperation to prove himself because he feels responsible for losing one of his own. I've always had a soft spot for Dean, so I was in full support of his redemption. I do find it funny how Dean tried to hit Babe with a blunt object and Babe is just like, let bygones be bygones. This is one of those instances where you shouldn't think too deeply. The actual plot of season 2 is whatever, and I know that sounds weird for me to say because I did place it at number 4, but for me it was really the character and relationship development that drove the story. The racing scenes leveled up quite a bit, and the X-Hunter branding was far more immersive. I wasn't bothered by the amount of NC scenes. In fact, I thought their frequency was very Pit Babe coded. I know some people wanted the Omegaverse elements to be more prominent, but I still don't like Omegaverse, so I preferred it this way. Maybe one day. When it comes to season 2 of Pit Babe, my amusement outweighed my concerns. Frankly, I'm just sad it's over. I've spent the past 3 years as a fan of this franchise, and even though it's such an unserious show, it means a lot to me. It's the end of an era, and just saying that out loud makes me emotional. But as the saying goes, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. We are now approaching the 3rd layer of Earth's atmosphere. This one was an easy pick. Landing at number 3 is none other than Beyond Cloud's queer historical series, Shine. I was very skeptical going into this series because I do not like Beyond Cloud's business ethics, or lack thereof, let's just put it that way. But I knew that Shine would be tackling socio-political issues that I care about deeply, so I decided to give it a chance. And I'm so glad I did, because Shine moved me in a way that no other series on this list could. The reason why it had such an emotional impact on me is due to the current state of the world. I couldn't help but draw parallels between 1960s Thailand and right now. For example, media censorship is the source of much conflict throughout Shine. We see Naran trying to report on the news and being silenced for it. We see the military covering up their crimes, including the murders of innocent people. We see Victor's father hesitating to publish his first-hand account of Stalin's regime because it'll put his family in danger. As an American, I was making immediate connections to everything, from the book bans in schools across the country, to the cancellation of shows that call out right-wing extremism, to the censorship of coverage on the genocide in Gaza. Another big conflict in the series revolves around the construction of this power plant that will displace a lot of people and pollute the air and water. I connected this plot point directly to the data cooling centers used to power AI and how those centers are polluting predominantly Black communities. And that leads to one of the major themes of Shine. Whether it's the moon landing or some other technological advancement, these things always come at a price. The most tragic example of this is, of course, Victor's death. I couldn't tell you the last time I felt so much anger watching a show. It didn't matter that I saw it coming. I still had a meltdown. Talk about resonating with a character. Victor has all these people calling him a foreigner, telling him he's ruining the country because he's mixed race. He's experiencing straight up racism from his own people. Not only that, but he's queer, and people know. And that's not all. He's also poor. I'm reminded of that iconic quote from Moonlight Chicken when Jim tells Li Ming, "Isn't it difficult enough to be poor? And now you're gay?" Bottom line, I'm always going to go to war for characters that I share a similar cultural identity or upbringing to. In terms of storytelling, I thought Victor's infatuation with Trin fit so perfectly into his character arc. It just made sense that he would fall in love with this older guy who he debates politics with. It's like a one-sided enemies to lovers scenario, except it's closer to annoyance than hatred. I've seen some fandom discourse from people saying that Victor and Trin should have been endgame, which immediately screams misinterpretation to me. The point of Victor having a crush on Trin was to show that he's still very much a child who feels intensely and acts impulsively. One of my favorite scenes is in episode 6 when Victor and Trin are hiding from the soldiers and Trin keeps pushing Victor away and pulling him back in. Not only was it acted beautifully, but I think that was a pivotal moment for Victor because that rejection led him to being more reckless with his life. That was the point. It was never romantic. Oppo did respond to this discourse in a Twitter space. He basically said that it would be morally wrong and unacceptable for Trin to give in to Victor's advances. I appreciate him speaking on this because I think some people are putting Victor in Claire's place, and those relationships are just not the same. I could go on and on about Victor all day. That's my brother. But another character I loved with all my heart and soul was Tanwa. First off, this is Miles' best performance. He really nailed the carefree hippie persona. Tanwa has the most endearing personality. My favorite thing about him is how he's able to find happiness in the smallest things. For example, in episode 3, Tanwa drags Trin outside to play in the rain. It's something that Trin wouldn't typically consider fun, but when he sees the joy it brings Tanwa, he suddenly gets it. This scene is just one of many that showcases their relationship dynamic really well. Trin is grounded, while Tanwa is flighty, and together they provide what the other one is lacking. Their differing viewpoints on life do cause problems at times, but without each other, they lose their balance. So at the end of the day, they always come back to each other. Trin and Tanwa have that "I'll find you in every lifetime" type of love, and I'm obsessed. Mile and Oppo were taking it. As for Krylert and Naran's affair, it was so tea. That's the best way I can describe it. I was sat for all the drama and scandal. For me, their scenes were among the most nerve-wracking in the series because you just knew it wasn't going to end well. You're along for the ride, all the secret rendezvous, and there's a point where you even start to root for them, which is crazy because they're cheaters. This series will have you defending anyone. Honestly, I was defending Naran left and right, which might be hypocritical, but at least he stood up for human rights, I guess. Anyway, the concept of writing to each other via a column in the newspaper is such a unique way to show progression in a relationship. Something I always love in queer historical media is how the characters communicate with each other. Often they have to speak in coded language because their relationships wouldn't be accepted. We see this with Krylert and Naran's library scavenger hunts, where they speak to one another using quotes from novels. It's such a clever way to build the tension between them, and we get to see their feelings deepen as the quotes become more romantic. Is this a safe space for me to admit that I hate Krylert? Okay, hate's a strong word because I did have a change of heart by the final episode, but for the majority of the series, I did not take my foot off his neck. I felt as though he functioned under the guise of caring about others and that everything he did was to preserve his own rank in society. Other than Victor, I would say Krylert had the most tragic story because he's a closeted gay man who was basically coerced into marrying a woman in order to further his military career. His first lover was murdered by the people who he strives so hard to appease, and eventually he finds out that his wife, Devi, has been orchestrating his entire life. Essentially, he's a puppet. I just pitied him in the end because there was no getting out of his situation unscathed. He was going to lose something, be it his wife, his job, his dignity, or Naran. I had zero faith in his ability to break free. So when he finally swallowed his pride and made the decision to expose the military's abuse of power, it was a genuine plot twist to me. I did not see it coming at all, and I thought it was such a great move on the writer's part. It didn't make me like him, but it made me feel like he could be a true leader. I always took issue with the fact that he wasn't willing to sacrifice a damn thing, not for himself or the people he serves. So to end on this note, where he's doing what's right because it's right and not because he wants to save face, is so monumental. Since I mentioned her, I want to share my thoughts about Devi. I've been going back and forth because I defended her all throughout the series, but when it was revealed that she was pulling the strings, my support began to falter. I'm still not sure how I feel about her as a character. She definitely used nepotism to her advantage in order to manufacture her ideal life. Who wouldn't? However, I feel like she took it too far when she started making threats. Once she did that, she completely alienated Trin, her own nephew. She basically told Kryler that if he leaves her, she's going to have him and Naran murdered, just like his late lover. That is wild. At the same time, Kryler kind of dug his own grave when he agreed to marry Devi. That was his choice. He vowed to be with her. He chose this life because it's conventional, and he felt like he could never truly be himself due to the prejudice he would face. He certainly had a lot going against him. That being said, I still believe that given the time period, a woman would always be at a greater disadvantage in this scenario. It's the women who are silenced, and we see the repercussions of that when Devi tells Kryler that it's her time to speak. Naran's girlfriend Dao also gets her time to speak through the public and degrading action of hitting Naran with her high heel. Her scenario was more cut and dry since she was just trying to do what she could to support the man she loves. So despite some of the moral confusion I was left with in regards to Devi, one thing I have to appreciate about this series is how they gave voice to the female characters. From Devi to Dao to Mother Moira, they all played a significant role in the story. I've spoken enough about the characters, so let's move on to all the symbolism. I've seen every episode at least 3 times, and I'm sure there are still details I've missed. But as a moon myself, let's start with all the moon symbolism. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but its relevance persists throughout the series. From Trin's moon brooch to Tanwa's moon origami to the moon charm hanging from his rearview mirror, and of course, the Apollo moon landing. Someone get me a moon counter. It all ties back to that first episode with the Apollo watch party. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. There's a double meaning here. The first has to do with the technological advancements we talked about earlier, and the other has to do with Trin stepping out of his comfort zone, exploring new worlds with Tanwa as his guide. At the end of episode 1, Tanwa welcomes Trin to the far side of the moon, the side that can't be viewed from Earth, containing the mysteries of a new decade. Every glimpse into the moon, every word about its wonder, is placed so methodically. The Apollo space mission corresponds directly with every trial and tribulation the characters face. Another symbol that appears in the first episode is the rabbit. Personally, I interpreted this as an Alice in Wonderland reference. Trin is the white rabbit who needs to stop and smell the flowers, and Tanwa is the Cheshire cat who continuously fades in and out of his life. I could be wrong, but it makes sense to me because Alice in Wonderland had a resurgence during the 1960s. It was also heavily associated with psychedelics at the time, and we see Trin getting high and behaving as if he's on a different plane of existence. How did you guys interpret the rabbit? I'm not sure if this last one stuck out to anyone else, but in episode 1, Trin pays Victor to shine his shoes. When you hear the word shine, what visual do you associate it with? For me, I envision someone getting their time to shine, to express themselves on a stage for all to see. Your mind doesn't immediately go to the act of shining someone's shoes, does it? Maybe you thought of shining a spotlight on a hidden truth, something that's remained in the shadows for far too long. Shine is a versatile word, and I think it takes on various meanings throughout the series, all of which are symbolic to the characters' journeys. Before I blast off, I need to highlight 2 final things: the cinematography and the script writing. You know when you're watching a piece of media and you see something that makes you say, "Oh, I wish I would have thought of that." That was me watching this series. There were so many cool camera shots and lighting tricks. Everything was so visually appealing. As for the dialogue, it was beautiful. Every word choice, every metaphor left me in awe. This show is like the love child of a decorated filmmaker and a poet laureate. If you know me, you know this one was a given. Number 2 on this list is the supernatural BL series, Chemjira. I'm just going to say it. I told you so. I told you guys back when I covered the Domundi showcase that Kang Namping are a force to be reckoned with. Kemjira's success is so validating to me. They did their big one with this series. I don't even know where to begin. I guess let's start with the production value. The budget is insane, especially for a series in this genre. I'm a big fan of ghosts, but every time I watch a supernatural BL, I have to accept that the visual effects are going to be low quality. Kemjira, however, has raised the bar. These are some terrifying ghosts. From their otherworldly powers down to the tiniest makeup details, everything came together to create a truly unnerving and suspenseful viewing experience. They couldn't have pulled off a story of this magnitude without having the money to back it up. And I think the way they decided to utilize that money was smart as well. This series is mostly set at and around Perron's house, and the cool thing is, they built that house from the ground up. This level of set building is unheard of in the Thai BL industry simply because it's so expensive and time-consuming. The Kemjira production team left no stone unturned. That house looked lived in. It looked like a shaman's house. This might seem like an obvious observation, but I find that so many shows take place in what I can only describe as an IKEA showroom, with no personal touches, no clutter, nothing. So it's no wonder why myself and so many others were drawn to this series. You can feel the love and dedication that went into constructing this world. Something else they put a lot of time and care into were the cultural and religious elements of the series. I've heard so many Thai people praise Kemjira for its accuracy when depicting certain rituals and practices. They've also praised the series for showing a side of Thailand that isn't typically represented in the media. As an international fan, there's just so much to learn. The amalgam of history and spirituality that's presented in this series will have you reflecting on your own beliefs and existence. One historical element I found interesting was the reenactment of the Holy Man's Rebellion in episode 7. That's an event that I never would have known about if it wasn't for Kemjira. I also liked their depiction of the soul scooping ceremony in episode 4 because again, it's an ancient ritual that I never would have known about. If you're interested in learning more about some of these cultural and spiritual elements, the official Twitter account for Kemjira posted a series called Perron's Book, where they provide brief explanations on the significance of certain items and rituals. Let's talk about the characters. So Kem is a character who carries a heavy burden, and that burden is his rapidly approaching death date. Every male in his bloodline is cursed to die before their 21st birthday. Despite this, he tries to live a normal life, to enroll in university like his peers. But the closer he gets to his birthday, the more aggressive the spirits become. They try to kill him at every turn, to possess him into killing himself. But Kem is protected by a special amulet. Unfortunately, that amulet is slowly losing its effectiveness against the forces of evil. Long story short, he's screwed. Well, not completely. He does have his best friend Jet, who can also see spirits, just not as clearly. What I love about their friendship is how loyal they are to each other, how they refuse to let the other suffer in silence. Jet is willing to risk his own life to save Kem, and Kem is just content to have someone who believes him without question. They don't need to say a word to each other to understand what the other is feeling. They just know. Kem and Jet's friendship has to be my favorite character dynamic in the series, even above Kem and Perron, who we'll get to in a minute. I love a good duo, and this one does it for me. Now on to Perron, aka the sexiest shaman alive. I kid you not, the first time I saw Kang as this character, my jaw hit the floor. Are y'all seeing him? The half-button shirt with the beaded necklace and the chunky rings and the dark circles. Oh my god, someone hold me back. In all seriousness, Perron is such a multifaceted character. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to become a shaman. His trauma led him there, specifically the loss of his mother to dark magic. Along the way, he lost his father as well, and eventually his grandfather, who brought this dark magic into their lives in the first place. Perron is all too familiar with death, and he tries to reconcile with it by becoming a shaman. Personally, I gave him a lot of grace when it came to his situation with Kem, because I understand what it's like to be devout. There are just some things that Perron can't do, because it would go directly against the 5 precepts of Buddhism. He can't take on Kem as a disciple because he's having improper thoughts about him. He can't jump into a relationship with Kem because he has to act in accordance with the teachings of his faith. Seeing him struggle to balance his duties to the people and his feelings for Kem is what made the slow burn between them so good. We see Paran starting to unravel at the mere sight of Kem. He knows he's falling for him, and that's scary, so he pushes him away over and over again until he realizes that he could really lose him forever. King and Namping's chemistry did not disappoint. They gaze at each other with such longing, and the tension between them feels melancholy at times. It makes sense. After all, they still have lingering feelings from their past life, which ended in heartache. It's like seeing a lost love every time they lock eyes. Speaking of lost love, the flashbacks to their past lives were among some of my favorite scenes in the series. The main reason why is because the casting is so on point. You have Janice and Namping, First One and Natty, Tun and Nietzsche, and even Patji, who plays the younger version of Paran. They all look eerily similar, or at the very least, related. Give the casting director a raise. Anyway, Wat and Kamika's storyline was incredibly tragic, and because I like to suffer, I keep going back and watching their scenes. When Wat looks up at the tree and sees Kamika staring down at him, that is cinema. Another scene that is pure cinema, Da seeing glimpses of Jet when she's staring at Gintana without her glasses, and then it cuts to Charn snapping out of his meditation. So iconic. I feel obligated to mention Cheos even though I don't care about him. He was there for sure, being a weirdo and sabotaging everything. That's as far as my commentary goes. Jet and Charn's relationship was honestly a reprieve from the angst going on between Kem and Paran. They brought that light, playful energy that secondary couples usually do. Their feelings were quite ambiguous, which fit well into the question of, what are we? This question is cumbersome, so much so that it takes them almost dying to finally find the answer. I wish I had more to say about these characters because I really do love seeing them together. After watching this series, I'm completely sold on Tun and First One. I see the vision. I have something controversial to say. After watching episode 9, I was Team Rempung. If I was Kem, I would have to die. Because what do you mean they threw this woman's baby in the river, framed her for a murder, then flogged her to death? I would have to die for Rempung in the name of feminism. Am I being satirical? A little bit. Here's the thing. A mother's love is the strongest force in the world. You will do anything for your child, even if it's not right. And I can only imagine what losing a child would do to your psyche. You're telling me you wouldn't want revenge? If not, you're probably a very sweet and level-headed person, and I celebrate you for it. Me, however, someone has to die. That being said, Rempung did take it a couple decades too far. You think she would have collected her karma ages ago, but she's still going hard. Her never-ending rage is a result of the pain that her soul has never healed from. It's very symbolic of generational trauma and the idea of breaking the cycle. Your pain can consume you over many lifetimes, and what you went through wasn't fair, but at some point, you just have to release it. Kem did nothing to Rempung, and yet he receives her wrath. It's sad from both ends. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that I empathize with Rempung and the burden of womanhood in a man's world. As the series progressed, Kem's journey to save his own life started to feel like an allegory for depression and mental illness. This became most apparent to me after the events of episode 10. We see Kem return to the city with Jet and Charn, who are watching over him 24/7. With the help of Jet's sister and a monk, they attempt to form a protective barrier around Kem, but little do they know, Rempung has already infiltrated the walls of his condo. While he's asleep, she lures him into a nightmare. He tries to escape from her voice, running frantically through the woods until he becomes tied to a tree. She appears to him, saying, "By day, disaster will follow you. By night, nightmares will haunt you endlessly. Staying on will only bring suffering. Not only to you, but everyone around you will suffer." She's planting thoughts in his head, trying to convince him that his existence will only continue to burden those around him. Just then, a noose lowers from the tree, and Rempung tells him to make a decision. Kem is tired, beaten down by this curse that has been haunting him his whole life. He was born with its claws dug agonizingly into his back. The stress and pain it brings him is relentless, and now Rempung is standing here, presenting him with a choice. Sure, it's an illusion of choice, but in that moment, it makes Kem feel like he's taking his life into his own hands. And so he says, "I give up." When he grabs for the noose, Paran appears, urging him to not give up. Long story short, they're able to dispel Rempung from the dream. When Paran approaches Kem, the latter begs him to let him go. Immediately, Paran objects. This is when Kem says, "I don't want to live anymore." And Paran replies, "You need to live. For your friends, for your parents, and for me. We must stay together in this life." For the time being, Kem concedes. Flash forward to the next morning, Paran tells everyone that Rempung has been in Kem's mind all along. I apologize for the extensive summary, but I wanted you to hear the word choices being made. Staying will only bring suffering. I give up. I don't want to live. You need to live for me. I might be casting my own judgment onto these words, but doesn't it sound like Kem is being characterized as suicidal? Think about it. He has also tried to jump to his death. This occurred while he was possessed by Rempung, the same Rempung who has been inside his mind all along. Her spirit feels representative of mental illness itself, and the way that it can afflict you like a curse. Maybe I'm reaching, but it's still an interesting concept. This allegory could even be expanded to postpartum depression. For example, there's the woman in episode 6 who seems to be possessed by Rempung, but in actuality, spirits have nothing to do with it. She's just a new mother who has been left to raise a baby on her own. I love these crosses between mental health and the supernatural that materialize every now and then in this series. The last thing I want to talk about are all the horror tropes in Chemjira. At the end of the day, the genre itself is why I was anticipating this series so much. As a horror fanatic, I have no choice but to advocate for more horror in BL. Make it scarier, make it gorier, give me every ghoulish archetype under the sun. Now, Chemjira is tame, but I noticed so many familiar tropes from classic horror movies being used in this series. First up, we have Kem's dream sequences. These were very reminiscent of the dream sequences from A Nightmare on Elm Street, where the harm that's done to you in your dreams has an effect on you in real life. In this scenario, Rempung would be the equivalent to Freddy, this nightmare figure that's trying to kill you. Next up, we have bleeding from the orifices, which we see when Paran is trying to dispel the evil energy from his body. This trope is lifted right from The Exorcist, and it's often used in religious settings with priests because it originates from the concept of stigmata, or wounds that appear on the hands and feet to signify crucifixion. The last horror trope I've been dying to talk about appears in episode 1. When Kem and Jet are on their way to the village, their bus gets overrun by evil spirits. Finally, my special interest is coming in handy because these visuals, and every visual like it, are inspired by the work of George A. Romero, the grandfather of zombie media. I couldn't help but draw parallels between this scene and some notable scenes from both Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, two films that popularized the concept of a zombie horde. I was also reminded of the film White Zombie starring Bela Lugosi, which is considered the first feature-length zombie film. The way that Rempung is able to control the spirits to do her bidding is very reminiscent of that film. In White Zombie, the zombies are being controlled in a manner that is almost identical to this. I get so giddy when I talk about zombie lore, but let's move on before I get too distracted. Finally, we have made it to the #1 spot. I have been dreading this moment because I know that loving this series is an unpopular opinion, but I have to speak my truth. My favorite BL series of 2025 is and was always going to be The Next Prince. Was there ever a doubt in your mind? Truthfully, The Next Prince was neck and neck with Chemjira for me. I had to weigh what matters to me more. Do I choose the show that makes me happy, or do I choose the show that's objectively flawless? When it was all said and done, I chose happiness. Seeing Z and Nanu in the roles of Sharon and Kanin felt like a privilege, like something I wasn't even worthy to consume. It's like all my dreams came true. All my hyperfixations merged together to form this series that I will always treasure and be so incredibly grateful for. I've said this before, but I love a royalty concept, especially a queer one. Young Royals is one of my favorite series. The Red, White, and Royal Blue movie will be my #1 priority when it comes out. I just relish in the themes of forbidden love, social hierarchy, and the duties of the heart. Because these things are magnified under a monarchy, it tends to result in a great deal of angst, tension, and triumph. You're going against convention in perilous ways, all for the freedom to love. There is nothing more romantic than that. I had high expectations going into The Next Prince for two reasons. The first reason is because I read the novel beforehand and I fell so absolutely in love with the story. It was written by CEO and Ennis, two authors who surprisingly don't have much work under their belts. Regardless, the world they managed to create is so immersive, so detailed in every sense. Emily was built from the ground up. From each clan and their traditions, down to the history and geography of the land. It's such an amazing read. I highly recommend purchasing the novel on Meb if you're interested. The second reason for my high expectations has to do with the production budget. In the Next Prince documentary titled Episode 0, Ofshin revealed that Domundi spent almost 9 figures to produce this series. For comparison, some movies with a similar budget include The Avengers Saga, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and Star Wars The Force Awakens. So I think my expectations were more than justified. Did The Next Prince meet my expectations? I would say so. The first time I watched the series, I fell into a bad habit of comparing it to the novel. For this reason, I think I'm going to stop reading the novels beforehand. It really warps my perception. Upon my rewatch of the series, I noticed that some of the things I found bothersome the first time around no longer bothered me at all. The pacing was a huge point of contention among viewers, and I wholeheartedly agreed with that initial critique. However, watching the series in hindsight, I don't think the pacing is that bad. I just think the fans all hated each other and wanted more screen time for their pairings. For me, there is one glaring example of rushed pacing, and that's Ramil and Peihtai's reconciliation. We see their emotionally volatile parting take place after Ramil is forced to step on Peightai. This final act, so degrading in nature, leaves Peightai with no choice but to preserve his remaining dignity. We spend some time away from their characters before we see them meet again on the beach. In another emotional outpouring, Ramil begs for Peihtai's forgiveness, to which Peightai accepts, the two having no one left but each other. In my opinion, the whole sequence happened way too late in the series, which made it feel off-kilter. We knew that Ramil's fear of his father was driving a wedge between him and Peightai, and that he would have to stand up to him eventually. It makes sense that the fencing competition would be the precursor to all of this, but it just feels like there wasn't enough time allotted to a situation that was very tense and abusive. Maybe it's the reconciliation itself that felt too easy. Since we're discussing Ramil and Peightai, I have to say, their relationship dynamic was so interesting. I was locked in for the BDSM elements. It made so much sense that Ramil and Peightai would reenact the abuse that Ramil's father was inflicting onto them. It was about taking back their power in a consensual setting. One of my favorite scenes is when they're getting intimate and Ramil starts hitting Peightai with the whip. But then he remembers all the times his father whipped Peightai and it freaks him out. He has this epiphany that he's just like his father, turning to violence as a means of self-expression. I can't convey to you how much I love this scene. The change in Jimmy's facial expression, going from aroused to appalled, was A+ acting. Another thing I love about Ramil and Peihtai's dynamic is how Ramil is always looking to Peightai for approval, even though he can do whatever he wants. In many ways, Peightai holds the power. It's a great subversion of the typical prince-servant relationship. I've mentioned this countless times in the past, but the bodyguard trope is perhaps my most favorite trope aside from soulmates. Protecting someone out of love or obligation, that's the crux of the bodyguard trope. As a royal guard, that distinction is intensified. Sharon has spent nearly his entire life devoted to serving the king. He feels indebted to him because he took him in after his mother's untimely death. You would never see him speaking out of line or defying his orders. The indoctrination runs deep. It isn't until Kanin enters the picture that he begins to question the king's intentions. When he instructs him to lie to Kanin about Tantanai's death, it forces him to acknowledge the larger issue at hand. He asks himself, why would the king make me hurt Kanin like this? The answer is to maintain power, to ensure that the Asawatan clan remains on the throne. It has nothing to do with Kanin's well-being. Sharon realizes that they're being used as pawns in a vicious game of chess, and that doesn't sit well with him. So he defies the king behind closed doors, investigating Tantanai's whereabouts and engaging in an inappropriate relationship with the prince. Still, we see his caution, his hesitance, all those manners that have been instilled in him since birth. Loving Kanin is simple, but everything that comes with it is a challenge, one that Sharon must face alone. I think Z does an amazing job at portraying this proper stoic guard who is slowly giving into his emotions, whose composure is rattled anytime the prince is in danger. Lately, I've been fighting this preposterous allegation that I'm thirsty for Z, and I suspect it might be due to my addiction with Sharon fan edits. There's just something about the uniform combined with the authoritative demeanor that makes me wish I was Kanin. But let's return to our regularly scheduled programming. We cannot ignore the fact that Nanu is a real-life prince. There is no one who's more princely than him. He's like the male version of Barbie. He can do anything he sets his mind to, whether it's learning to speak in a posh British accent, learning how to fence, learning archery, horseback riding, singing, dancing, literally any skill set you could think of, he has mastered it. So naturally, he is the perfect fit for Kanin. I love the spunky little attitude he brought to this character. Kanin is basically Sophia the First. He was a boy in the village doing all right, then he became a prince overnight. Now he has to figure out how to do it right, so much to learn and see. No, but that theme song really does describe his situation. It only takes 2 days for his whole world to collapse. He finds out that the man who he calls his father is actually a royal guard that was ordered to take care of him. By extension, he finds out that he's the long-lost prince of a country where everyone believes he's deceased. And what do you know, there are also people hunting him down, trying to kill him. So much for hanging out with Paul. After the first time Sharon saves his life, Kanin is bound to him, having no one else to trust. They face numerous obstacles in a short amount of time, and that forced proximity causes their feelings to accelerate. One aspect of the novel I wish they would have included in the series is their extended stay in the hotel room. In episode 3, Kanin mentions that he and Sharon have already slept in a bed together for several nights. As a viewer, we never actually see that happen, because it only happens in the novel. While Sharon and Kanin's relationship development makes sense to me, I think it could seem like their feelings come out of nowhere. It would have made just a bit more sense if they showed the time Sharon spent doting on Kanin in the hotel room. I will never escape the grips of Z and Nanu's chemistry. It's so fun to take off my thinking cap and just watch them act together. There are so many moments where it doesn't even feel like they're acting. What they have is unconditional. It makes every exchange between Sharon and Kanin feel so organic, from romantic gestures and shows of affection to lustful gazes and tearful outbursts. There's a reason why the authors wrote the novel with them in mind. One scene I keep coming back to is in episode 4 when Kanin is stranded in the cave. Sharon is frantic when he finds him, injured and alone, and he blames himself for not acting faster. He tells him, "You mean more to me than you could ever imagine." Then he picks him up bridal style and starts carrying him. You guys, I was tickled pink. This is yet another example of this series being curated specifically to me. I love when one person carries the other person. I also love the idea of Sharon being not just protective, but overprotective. Again, it plays into that paradox of love and obligation. Another scene that plays into this is in episode 7 after Sharon detects the fact that Kanin has been poisoned. He saves his life with quick action. That's his obligation. However, nursing him back to health isn't. He does that out of love. Earlier, I mentioned lust, so I just want to throw this out there. Sharon and Kanin's NC scenes have fantastic rewatch value. It sounds pretentious to call an NC scene artistic, but the cinematography was stunning. The Next Prince set a new elevated standard for Domundi when it comes to NC scenes. Also, I find it so hilarious that everyone thought Sharon saying "good boy" was cringe because, again, that was a detail that felt curated to me. It's like Afshin sent me a telepathic message asking me how I would like Sharon to speak to Kanin. Moving on to Prince Calvin and Jay, personally, I thought their relationship would be much more impactful as a close friendship. Imagine you're this lonely, introverted prince living away from home, and one day you meet this commoner who is speaking out against the royal family. It's an unexpected connection, one that exposes Calvin to life outside the aristocracy. It's giving the princess and the pauper just a tad bit. There's the potential for a deep friendship, followed by an impassioned friend falling out. If you've ever fallen out with a friend, then you know it's 10 times worse than a breakup. I just don't understand how the romantic feelings formed between Calvin and Jay. Why did they like each other? When did their feelings first develop? There's a crucial piece of relationship development that's missing here. It's either a pacing issue, a writing issue, or both. I wouldn't say I was disappointed by their storyline. I was just a tad bit uninterested, and I'm saying this as a net girly who was eating up the concept of him as a prince. Like Kimjira, The Next Prince was produced with so much attention to detail and love for the craft. Here are some things that stuck out to me on the production side. The first is the costume design. I adore everyone's outfits. Kanin looks so delicate and feminine with the puffy sleeves, the fitted vests, and the lacy cuffs. He gives me major gender envy. As I mentioned previously, I am very enamored by Sharon's uniform. But you know who has an even nicer uniform? His mother. The female Royal Guard uniforms are so chic, with the cape draped over one shoulder. I also love how Ramil and Ava wore colors that correspond with their family emblems. Ramil with green, Ava with pink. It suited their personalities well. This team of designers and seamstresses tailor-made every outfit with such care and precision. They did an amazing job. The prop makers painted, sculpted, and constructed every art piece seen throughout the series. There were no cutting corners when it came to set dressing, and the production team took a hard stance against the use of AI tools. Domundi even hired their own orchestra to create the score for this series, so every instrumental you hear came from this group of internationally recognized musicians. This is what I mean when I say love for the craft. I have to give credit to all the talented individuals who converged on this project. The aesthetics were on point. They made every scene feel regal and distinguished. That's exactly what you want in a royal drama. This series has rekindled my love for writing in a similar manner as I Feel You Linger in the Air rekindled my love for reading. I have been so inspired by The Next Prince that I've begun writing my own version of the story, a fan fiction if you will. I've also been writing poetry again, which is a huge deal for me because I've always dreamt of publishing a book of poetry. I have Emily and its residents to thank for this boost in creativity. I feel like I am somewhat myself again. We would be here all day if I went over every little nuance and motif that impacted me. There's the juxtaposition between Sharon and Kanin and their mothers Kunita and Cheetah, who some people interpreted as doomed Yuri. There's the Hunger Games style archery competition where the heirs help each other escape in a symbolic act of unity. There's the mounting protests over pollution from the mines and how Kanin's Western values position him as the people's prince. For better or for worse, I love this series. I know it's not perfect, but it definitely suits my tastes. Thank you to the moon and back for watching. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but I appreciate everyone who sat through it, whether you agreed or disagreed with my choices. I'm just glad you're here. What were your favorite BLs of 2025? We're in an era where we have the luxury to be picky, and I'm so here for it. There is something for everyone. As a reminder, I did react to Pit Babe Season 2 and Shine over on Patreon. You can check out both for free. Are there any specific topics you'd like to see me cover? If so, share them in the comments. But that's it for today's video. Thanks again for watching, happy holidays, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!